Now to Ukraine, and the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy are making a joint visit. It's a show of support for the country, and the men will discuss Ukraine's request to use long-range US and British missiles against Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymr Zelensky's repeatedly asked for permission to strike deep into Russian territory, saying his forces were fighting with their arms tied. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beeks in Kyiv. This is significant, in that it's the first joint visit by a British Foreign Secretary and their American counterpart in more than a decade. In this joint mission, the Americans and British hopes this projects the sense of solidarity they say they have with Ukraine. Of course, we've seen many visits before of leading politicians from both countries, and this is the latest one, but when they arrive here, they will find for themselves that President Zelensky, as well as this ongoing support, actually wants a policy change from both the Americans and the British. He's been talking about this for months, and as you say, this relates to the issue of long-range missiles. The Ukrainians already have them. It's just that they need permission from other British, the Americans and other suppliers so that they can use them. President Zelensky says it's absolutely essential that the Ukrainians can strike much further into Russia, because if they do that, they can target Russian bombers on the airfields before they even get the chance to take to the skies and launch their attacks that we see day in day out across Ukraine. Russia hasn't commented on this particular trip or request, but we have heard from Vladimir Putin in the past, Nick, saying that if there was permission for weapons to be used against Russia, it could lead to very serious problems. So I presume that's all part of the calculation as this trip goes on. You're absolutely right, and President Putin has also said that ultimately responsibility would be with not the Ukrainians who fired these weapons, but the foreign powers, the Western allies of Ukraine who had supplied them and given permission for them to be used. And I think what President Putin has been saying in the recent weeks, months, but also over the last 2.5 years has been in the forefront of the minds of some of the Western allies who worry most about an escalation and talk about a much wider conflict, and at its worst scenario some sort of nuclear element to it. But we're getting indications that the Biden administration may well be open to this policy change, not least from President Biden himself, who overnight was saying that his administration was working on the idea of giving this permissions. So it could well be that this is one of the many things we've seen in the 30 months of this war, where the Americans changed their mind initially and then Western allies, they fall in line pretty quickly afterwards. We had it with more defensive weapons, then with the issue of F-16 fighter jets that were sent to Ukraine. Could it be now that with the issue of long-range missiles, finally Americans says yes, you can do that, and the UK, France and Germany and others say okay, yes, we support this too. Nick Beek there.